Welcome to Fun and Fundraising, everybody, the podcast where we talk with people behind top nonprofit galas and signature fundraising events to showcase how they positively transform their communities. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli, and today I'm really excited to have Chantel Boudreaux on. And she is the Senior Director of Operations and Events for the Perot Museum. And they do a wonderful fundraising event called A Night at the Museum. And it's a highly successful event. It's not necessarily done in a typical gala format. So we're going to talk about unique ways that you can really bring fun the entire evening from the second people arrive all the way through to a raucous after party at the end. So this is going to be a really fun chat, and I'm looking forward to it. And with that, Chantel, welcome. And I'm so excited to have you here as a guest today.
Thanks for having me, Rob. I'm really excited to be here.
Absolutely. So talk a little bit about the mission of the Perot Museum.
The mission of the Pro Museum is to inspire minds through nature and science.
Fantastic. And, talk a little bit about that because STEM is such an important, it's such an important thing. And so much of people's careers being shaped now is really done by STEM. So talk a little bit about the importance of STEM education and maybe elaborate somewhat on some of the museum programs that you have around it so that people get a good understanding of the range of stuff that you can do there.
Of course, I think today it's more important than ever to have the STEM education, especially in our younger learners, all the way from like our preschoolers all the way through, eighth and ninth grade. That's the age range that you're really formulating if you want to be a doctor, if you want to be an engineer, if you want to, work for DART and help with, city planning. It all comes from STEM, and really getting into, children's minds at a young age is so important. When you think about even our artists and our dancers, they have STEM involved with the way that their bodies respond to, think about the football players, like everything that they do to get ready for a game. A lot of it is the doctors that they're seeing, how they're, rehabbing their bodies, that kind of thing. So at the Pro Museum, we really take a hands-on approach and let the children and the students, I think a lot about students, we are big time right now, and final spring, push for field trips as school ends this upcoming Friday. So we're seeing about 2,000 school children a day at the museum, Monday through Friday. So just seeing the museum in their eyes is really incredible. We have our tech truck program, which is think about you know, big trucks that go out in the community that have tables that fold out from the side, and they have really incredible programs that go with them. They can go to festivals, to art fairs, to schools themselves. They are very much known to go to, Kay Bailey Hutchinson, over to when you've got the marathons coming in, the cheerleading competitions, everything like that. So really, really taking our learning that you can get at the museum outside in the community. And then I mentioned the field trips. We have field trips that come every single day, I feel like, at the museum. Summer camps in the summer and around the holidays. So that way, when the children are out of school, they can come have fun at the museum and learn at the same time. And then we have our outreach programming. So we have our vans that go out to schools. So think about the schools that are maybe 45 minutes to an hour away from the museum, where maybe getting to the museum is a little bit more challenging for a normal field trip, because you show up around 9:30, 10, you tour the museum, you have to leave at 1. Well, if they are, more than an hour away, that's really hard to get to. And so we have our outreach program with our learning team that actually takes programs offsite to the schools as well. They do things at night where some parents get involved. So it's really, really interesting the way that we've really been able to, go into the Perot Museum and expand how we offer learning. I think especially coming out of COVID, that's something that we wanted to enhance as well. You had time to kind of sit there and be like, okay, this has worked, this hasn't worked. What do we see in the next 2 to 3 years that we can do as different?
Fantastic answer. And I really love the education component, especially with children to visit. And even more so, the van where it's almost kind of museum in a box.
It
I
is.
guess we can kind of call it that.
Yeah.
So share a little bit more, like, so how do you bring the programming remotely? Like, because when it's in a van, I think people have, could it be a conversion van? Could it be kind of like one of those giant mini school buses? Like, talk a little bit about that and how you bring that in and how you are able to create that immersive experience, for lack of a better term, remotely with the children and the adults, like you said, that you serve with that.
I think one of the best examples I can think about is the Great North American Eclipse that we all got to experience here in Dallas back in April of 2024. We really worked on that event for a good 3 or 4 years, trying to figure out how could we go out in the community, what we could do at the museum. And out in the community is one of the things I'm most proud of. We figured out how to take our learning trucks and vans out to schools, as well as provide astronomers that could go into the schools and provide the educational programming on what is an eclipse, why does an eclipse happen, when does an eclipse happen, when will it happen here again in Dallas, which isn't for another 300 years, so we're not going to get a good one for a long while. But that was really, really interesting to see. And the nice thing about the tech truck, think about like a Sprinter van. It's a Sprinter van that we have completely remodeled. They have their own power. They can, go out day or night. And they have these tables that fold out from the side, but they also have a ramp in the back and on the side where students can go up into the tech truck as well. And so there's programming that can happen inside the truck or outside. So like this upcoming weekend to celebrate our new Moody Family Children's Museum reopening, our tech trucks are actually going to be in our parking lot in Lot A, right outside the museum. And it's where we're going to have stomp rockets and a couple other programs. And so there's these tables, and the students and families and, everybody are able to interact with our team, learn and grow, where it doesn't really feel like it's so in your face of what we're teaching you, if that makes sense.
That makes total sense. So really what you're doing is you're really making learning fun and
Exactly.
really immersive. I mean, there's so many different ways to be immersive. And I love that there's different ways that, people can go inside the van if they're claustrophobic or, if it's hot in the Texas heat, they may not want to go in a van. They may want to stay outside with a breeze. Everyone's kind of got the opportunity, to learn. And it's just awesome that the parents can join in some of those immersive experience, whereas if they're working during the school day and can't chaperone, they can't do that. So the fact
Yeah.
that you offer all these different entry points, not just for the students to learn, but for the parents to see their children's passion for STEM and
Mhm.
encourage that growth and that development because it is such a critical field.
It is such a critical field, especially nowadays. I think about, I'm 42. I think about when I was like in sixth grade. Was I super excited about science? No. And it was the way that I was being taught. I'll never forget them making me dissect a cat in eighth grade. And I was like horrified for years. And I look at it now and I'm like, wow, the way that we're breaking down STEM is so interesting. And it's not rocket science in a way. It's like, why didn't we think about this years ago? But I think about the technology nowadays and just all the years of learning and, trial and error, what works and what doesn't work.
I'm glad you brought that up. And you can tell you've got a lot of really big passion for the museum and what you're doing. I'd love for you to, one, talk about where that passion comes from for STEM, but two, before that, talk a little bit about how you initially got involved with the Perot Museum and, what made you choose this organization, to make a substantial part of your career.
So I started back at the Perot Museum back in 2019. So it's been a little over 6 years. I feel truly blessed for what I've been able to do in my time there. It is a truly incredible organization. And like I said earlier, just seeing the look on the, children's faces, the grandparents' faces, no matter if I'm having an awful day, I just had a rough call or, everybody has a bad meeting nowadays. I can go downstairs and I can be like, okay, this is what we're doing it for. So even on those, sleepless nights, getting ready for the clips last year, getting ready for the Children's Museum to open this weekend, it really is about, wow, we are changing lives and we're giving back to our community that's given us so much. I grew up in Gulfport, Mississippi, and I'll never forget that my grandmother signed me up to go to marine biology camp every single year for a week. And I would go over, and it was, when I think about it now, and I've told my mom this, it sounds like, oh, you're just going to go learn about some fish. But we really learned a lot about nature and science. And I wasn't understanding that at the time. And so doing what I do now of being at the museum and being able to support all the teams that really go and spend a lot of time creating these programs is what makes it so beneficial and worthwhile for me.
That's amazing. And that it started for you from a young age with your grandmother, no less, like when you were visiting her in the
Yeah.
summer and all that. That is so cool. And to see that kind of carry as a through line throughout your life and that you made a career out of it is it's so cool. And I want to, talk, I know we're here today to talk about, a night at the museum, which is really just such it really is one of the best fundraising events in Texas. One of the reasons for that is, a great event or slash party, whatever you want to call it, is going to always have a devoted following mixed in with new people. But talk about the secret to creating that devoted following for your signature fundraising event so you've got a good, steady base of support that you can always count on to put out the best event possible.
Well, thank you for being so kind and gracious about Night at the Museum. It truly is the only type of event like it here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. There might be some other museum that does something similar, but what we really strive to be is we are a roaming cocktail party when you think about it that way. It's not a seated dinner. There's not an auction. We're not actively fundraising during the event itself. The tickets and the packages that you purchase before you come is really where we're raising all of our funds. So when our guests get there, they're able to immerse themselves just as a student would get to do on a field trip or a child coming with their grandparent. So that's what I think makes us stand out, makes us really different. And we've stayed true to that over the years. So before we got into our current building where we are now, when we were in Fair Park, there was a dinner that they used to do. It was called Dinner in the Wild. And when they moved to the museum, our current location on Field Street, and those museums all merged, they wanted to do something different. So Night at the Museum was born. And it was like, how can we have our donors, our fundraisers, our potential, new donors get to see what they're fundraising for. Night at the Museum raises money for our financial aid program. So think about all the Title I schools. They're able to come to the museum and we are able to fundraise for their general admission tickets to get to maybe one of those kids could cure cancer someday or could figure out how to get to Mars. We don't know that, but we're giving them the opportunity. And so I think Night at the Museum, it changes every single year. We used to have a theme for it, and we would like try to have all the activations we would do in the halls and the food really play off the theme. Now we let the museum really stand for itself, and we just bring the latest and greatest programming and food and ideas to it, which I think has made it even better.
That's fantastic. I've actually got a couple of follow-up questions,
Yeah.
for that because you had a lot of great things in there. But the first things first, and I just think it's remarkable that you are able to raise seven figures without a program. That is really there's a real trick to it. But you had mentioned, you get the ticket purchases, but you also get a really good, impressive silent auction. So tell us the secret, and just purchasing items in advance. So tell us the secret to getting people to kind of do that buy-in before they ever walk in the door, because that's something a lot of nonprofits really do struggle with.
Yeah, I think that is something that's very interesting. So we really pride ourselves on we are going to sell the ticket packages. We'll sell individual tickets if we have an opportunity. And we need to have done the work the year before to say, this is a party you do not want to miss. So it's all the thought and the planning and the processing. And I think we have an incredible development team and their stewardship throughout the entire year, not just for selling these tickets, really is what helps us be able to fundraise for this event. It's like the ticket you don't want to miss. We're going to sell out. You're going to want to come. And so I think that that's what's so interesting. I think people have brought up the idea, do we do a silent auction? Do we not? And we're like, let's not. Let's be the different organization. And the setup itself is very different because you don't have one room where you can have 1,000 people seated for a dinner or a big presentation. We will do remarks during our VIP, that first hour that a small group buys tickets and goes to. And then once the whole museum open, guests are going throughout the whole museum the entire night. And then they go to the after party. So I think that some people are like, I don't want to miss the after party because you never know what we're going to do at the after party. Some people will come for the food. Wolfgang Puck Catering is our exclusive catering partner for this event. And it's truly an incredible partnership we have with them. And their chefs bring it every single time. Everybody wants a pot pie. There's always a pot pie. It's like the Wolfgang Puck signature. And you're like, you want to be at the party because you want to try the pot pie. So I think it's really doing the work and getting out and promoting the event and kind of dropping little like goldfish, so to speak, along the way that's going to keep everybody more and more interested in what you're going to do at this year's event.
So I'm glad you mentioned that. You know, I know the food's a part of it, and I know the food is part of the whole roaming cocktail format. So, explain what a roaming cocktail means and how you effectively tell a story through the roaming cocktail before the after party begins, so that you're kind of being cohesive and showcasing all that the museum has to offer.
Absolutely. So think about it this way. We want to make sure everybody's getting fed a dinner, but we're not going to have them sit at a table that's like a tin top with other people. So we have food that is tray passed as well as food stations that are chef activated throughout the event. So think about a guest coming in, they've bought a general admission ticket. They're going to get on our escalator and they're going to want to go to level 4. The escalator is really going to start to bring them in and immerse them into the experience as they see downtown all lit up and then our big T-Rex at the top of our escalator. You're going to be greeted right when you get off the escalator with something that is tray passed, like a small canapé, all the way up to a like I mentioned, a pot pie or a salad, or we've done duck a la orange that was tray passed, and all of the plates are about the size of your hand. Our big thing is we want you to be able to hold it with your hand and in the vessel and be able to eat standing up. We do have cocktail tables. We do have, places where people can sit, but you want people to be able to engage with the exhibits and with the different activities that we have set up throughout the entire museum. So when it comes to the food, I really lean on our partnership with Wolfgang Puck Catering because we tell them, okay, this is kind of where our thought process is for this year. They've done it 13 years, so they have a good idea of kind of what we want to do. But then we say, but we want to change this and we want to change this point. What are y'all seeing is the top trend, across the world? Is there, different food that we haven't tried before? And really trying to engage and let their chefs come back to us and say, this is what we think is going to be the latest and the greatest. I will say last year, I think we floored everyone. We turned our gift shop into a 10-minute tasting restaurant. And so as guests arrived, they were able to make their reservation for their 10-minute time. And that was such a hit. We're considering doing it again this year because it was such an incredible experience. The room literally looked like you were at a tasting restaurant here in Dallas where you're going to go in and there's 10 people in there total. And that all the chefs were activated. There was cocktails that were with it. And it was really interesting and different and something we've never done before. So I think that we really knocked it out of the park last year coming up with that idea with the Wolfgang Puck team of them saying, we really want to try this. What do y'all think? And I will say I was a nervous wreck over it. I was like, oh, if this doesn't work, somebody's going to be really upset, very disappointed. I'm going to have to apologize to so many people. But it worked out really well. And there's guests that elected not to go to it. Some people were like, no, I don't want to do that. That's not my thing. Or I'd rather go up to level 3 and see the newest gems and mineral exhibition. And so it's really like guests get to pick what they want to do. We're not telling them what to do. We do send out like the morning of night at the museum. We'll send out, hey, here's what to make sure not to miss tonight. And then when guests are getting there, they're asking where different things in the museum are.
That is so cool the way that the way that you explain that. And it's just the whole the tasting room thing and turning the museum gift shop in the back is absolutely genius. And there was something that you mentioned and you touched upon a couple times, and I want to ask a follow-up question to it because it is not every day that an organization uses the same caterer for 5 years, let alone 13. So what is the secret to having top quality food year after year that you can partner with the same organization, which is great because you don't have to educate a new organization on what it is the audience wants. So what is the secret to creating a long-standing partnership with a catering partner?
I truly think it's the trust. When I started back in 2019, I started in February, and they had already started planning night at the museum for that November. And I then am like getting told, "Hey, you're going to work on this. You're going to do this." And I had to sit with them and be like, "Explain to me," because it's really hard to explain it to an event planner to come in and be like, what are we doing? How is this going to work? So I think it's the trust level. There is so much that they've done and that they've accomplished in their many years as an organization. And you know that they are going to show up. They're going to surprise us. They're going to remember things, like remembering certain things have to be on certain levels that I don't have to go remind them every single year. And I think that's really important. They also, when I say surprise me, like they flew in all these chefs that are the, Oscar chefs last year. And those were the ones that were in the 10-minute tasting restaurant. And I didn't even know that those were the chefs that were coming in until Thursday night when they're doing their walkthrough. They were like, we wanted to surprise you, but we didn't want to tell you just in case something went wrong with someone's flight. So I think it's them knowing how much we rely on them to always have such an incredible food experience for the guests. The guests have grown in love. And I think that they trust us to know that we are going to be a good partner for them. Somebody said this one day, it's one of their executive chefs said, you've never told us where to put the food. We've told you these are the good areas where we can make sure your guests have a good experience. So I think it's that kind of give and take, which has been really, really helps us be as successful as we are.
That's fantastic. And the trust is so key. And I love that they kind of left the surprise until the end. And there's nothing wrong. Always over deliver. Never over
Yes.
promise, under deliver. Under promise and over deliver. Do a great big surprise. And that's the perfect example of that, because if they had said that and something, God forbid, did happen,
Right.
the flight got canceled, someone got COVID, whatever it was,
Exactly.
you would have, that would not have worked. And what's interesting is this is such a first class event. And and I love talking with events people at top organizations like the Perot Museum. It doesn't happen in a vacuum within only your events team, and that you often will also bring in outside event producing partners. So
Mhm.
talk about how the organization, how the Perot Museum does that, and what it takes to do a successful collaboration between an organization's event team and any outside event producers that you may bring in.
Yes, I feel like we are truly blessed. We work with Valdivia Ventures, Jason Valdivia, and he is our creative director. He will come in and just be like, hey, I've thought about this, or what if we do this? And will bring us a plan. And he knows like we have to top what we've done before. We can't not, like I say, bring it every single time because then our guests are going to be let down. So having such a strong relationship and partnership, and I'll go back to that trust, like just knowing that like, okay, we've not done this, we're going to figure it out. And also having strong internal teams when it comes to our exhibits team, our engineering team, our security team, all teams working together. I think it truly is like a good yin and a yang of we're going to try to push the boundaries as much as we can, but then we're also going to stay grounded in our successes that we've had and know what doesn't work. I will say there's some, people that are like, oh, we all feel like y'all have probably done it perfect every single time. And I think Jason and I will meet and we'll be like, what could we have done different? What did we not do? Where did we fail? And I think being able to find those failures is good because it's not his fault or my fault or anyone's fault. It's just like, oh man, like we've grown, things have changed, times have changed, that kind of thing. And I think it goes on all the way to our AV vendors, our florists, our linens, everything that we do at that event is everyone relying on each other and no one wants to let the other person down. So I think that that's how we've been real successful and we've made partnerships over the years. Actually met Jason back in February of 2020. And of course, we didn't have Night at the Museum that year. We did something else for our donors that was able to be delivered to their homes. And I remember, trying to explain to him how the event works. I've only seen it one time and, done it one time. And we ended up having to have a massive tent in the parking lot. We still had the museum open. People could go in, but there wasn't food and drink inside because we had to have, the COVID was still going on. And I think that truly strengthened our relationship to where he's going to try to pitch a bunch of stuff. And I'm like, oh, don't know about this, don't know about this. But then we always end up with such an incredible product that our donors and even our staff are excited to see.
That's amazing. And I love that's a unique way for a relationship to start. Anything that started in COVID, that's just unique in and of itself.
Exactly,
Let's
exactly.
just say that. So I think it's amazing that you were able to evolve. And here's the deal: if you work successfully with someone during that, you probably
Mhm.
work with them for the rest of your life because there's probably never going to be a more stressful time than that.
I agree. There's so many wonderful things that Jason and I've gotten to do and plan together because of being at the museum. And, the Great North American Eclipse is one of them. I think we've truly shown everybody they can do it. They'll do it together. They have the best interest at heart. And I think that that's one of the biggest things that you can have.
Absolutely. And you had talked, when we were talking about the food, you were talking about how you have certain food at certain levels and all that. And I want to talk a little bit about the museum spaces and exhibits and how the organization uses a night at the museum to allow donors to connect with the mission of the organization when they're in those, when they're in those spaces. So talk a little bit about how that works and the importance of letting people explore as much of the museum as you're possibly able to do so that they can make that emotional connection with the organization.
Of course, like I think about level four. That's our, Life Then and Now Hall, and we have our paleo lab there. So one of the really cool things that we do is our paleo team is there that night, and we actually open up the doors to the paleo lab, and guests can go in and talk to our paleo team, see what they're currently working on. So it really goes back to the mission of the organization of this is what their science team is out doing in the field. So it really kind of resonates and brings it back home. And then when you have on level two, you have our bio lab and our challenge lab, and we've partnered with different organizations to come in and bring in these activations. And so like we've had Children's Help come in, and one of the amazing things that they did is they brought the latest and the greatest technology when it comes to somebody that's having like a knee surgery, and a guest could go up and could actually use like the little probes and see what the doctors are seeing. And so I think it's that element too of just being able to be like, wow, I'm having my cocktail or my mocktail and a great food experience, but then I'm also learning about this technology. Our challenge lab last year was able to bring in an activity that we had been doing with students throughout the school year so far. And they were able to tell the donors, one of the big questions is like, well, tell me, like, how are the students engaging with this? What do they think about coding bots and that kind of thing? And our team was able to give that feedback. So I think that really, like, that's the sliding into home plate of being like, this is it in action. This is what they've seen. So that's what's been so interesting to me. And of course, on, the lower level down in the sports hall, people can race the T-Rex and, race Patrick Mahomes and the different athletes. But we've also had this robot that throws footballs down there before. And so guests could, and we have a great photo back from 2019 of a guest jumping up, in her dress, like catching a football and then hitting the Heisman pose after. And you're just like, she had the time of her life doing that. Who knows if she's gotten to ever catch a robot from or a football from a robot before. So I think that that's really such an element too. And then last year, on David's deck, which is the deck that's off of our main lobby, we activated that with fried Oreos with different sauces. And so guests could actually go out there, and we've always had a kitchen out there where guests couldn't go. And when we were like, you know what, we're going to change it up. We're going to move the kitchen somewhere else. I apologize to Wolfgang Puck's team for that. I don't know if they were super happy about that, moving a kitchen on them that they've had for 12 years. But we were able to really say, okay, we've not highlighted this before. And so I think it's been something that's been really, really nice that we've done, and letting the museum speak for itself. Because it's an incredible place, and there's so many memories that people have. And people will come with their friends and be like, oh, we have to go see this. We have to go see this. I read about this. And really letting them be able to do that has been super special.
That's amazing. I mean, those are such fun, unique ways, like jumping in the air in a cocktail dress and catching a football and doing a Heisman post. I mean, those are things people are going to remember for many, many, many years to come. They're probably things they're never going to forget. And what's interesting about the donors, and I kind of want to turn to event leadership for a second, in terms of there's organization event leadership and then there's chair event leadership.
Mhm.
And, you all have a unique proposition in that all the fundraising has to happen in advance. So you probably have to look at event chairs in a slightly different way than most other organizations do. So talk about the importance of having a strong relationship with event chair so that so the Perot Museum can meet its event goals as well as its organizational and funding goals.
Yeah, I think the relationships with the adventurers is extremely important. And I think it's something that our development team works on and talks about and really focuses on, because you also want it to be a good experience for them. And so having an event team that can really support them and a development team that can really support them and say, hey, we don't want this to be a massive lift for you. We want you to enjoy this as well. I think that's where they find the joy and the happiness in it. And it can't be like that for every organization. And I totally understand that. I think about our, event chairs, really the couple years when everybody was kind of coming out of COVID, it was a lot of, conversations with them on like, this will work, could this work, could this not work? And it's a lot of give and take as well, because you want them to feel involved. So I always love to hear, last year our event chairs loved cotton candy. That was one of the biggest things that they love. And they were like foodies. And so we really wanted to like, hit it out of the park with them on that. And we did. And then we were able to hit all of our fundraising goals. So I think that that's a lot of it too, is really having such a strong development team who knows their donors and knows, their event chairs so well.
That's amazing, and just having them bring the energy, because that's such an important and a key thing too. And the funny thing is that we've been chatting and we still haven't gotten to the peak of the evening. And I have some questions about that. So how do I have a lot of questions about about how to do a successful after party, but you have this amazing experience, yet people want to go to the after party. So talk a little bit about, one, how you get everybody there from all throughout the museum, and what advice you would give to an organization looking to engage their people all night, from the second they walk in, and that they're staying 4 or 5 hours, and that they are rocking it on the dance floor, dancing to the DJ, fill in the blank at the after party.
Yeah, I think a great example would be last year. So we always make sure that the valet exit is or to pick up your car is very close to where you're exiting, and you have to walk by the after party, because nobody wants to be the stick in the mud and not be like, oh, well, they're playing my song, or oh, they're doing this, or oh, they're passing, coffee and espresso martinis or something like that. So probably the most successful to me would be last year, where we were able to have guests exiting the doors to the after party. It was in our auditorium and our temporary exhibition hall, because we didn't have a temporary exhibit at the time. The doors were open and everybody's getting off the elevators and walking by it, and people are just like, oh, I'll go in for a minute. And then there's different activities going on. So not only are you tray passing food, and you have, of course, bars with mocktails and cocktails, everything like that. We had seating areas. There's a photo booth activity that was going on. DJ was dancing. I think it all goes into this design element too, of what does it look like in there? Does it look like somewhere you want to go and you feel comfortable too? Or does it kind of look lame and the lights are too high and you're just like, I look a little greasy after walking around the museum for hours? We also had our auditorium was set up. Think about, some people don't want the loud music. Some people want to go with who they've had fun with and just sit and talk and maybe have a piece of cake. And we had this incredible pie and cake station that was in our auditorium, and there was doors that entered and exit from our traveling exhibition hall where you could hear the music, but it wasn't that overwhelming loud bass music in the auditorium, and people could just sit in there and relax, still feel like they were at the party but not feel like it was so in your face. So I think you have to think about who your donors are as well. There's so many different ages of donors, and some donors are like, hey, I'm going to bring an associate that's 30 years younger than me, but they're wanting to get involved in philanthropy, or they want to go to this really cool party. You've got to have the balance of what works best for them, and then you need to have restrooms that are very close to where they're exiting one, and also to the after party, because nothing will break a party if you can't get someone to the restroom if they really need to go. You don't want them to be like, I need to go because I need to do that. So I think that that's really important too. Location is key for everything.
Location is key for everything. And everything about that was brilliant. From the valet thing is absolutely genius on every level, because it's like, oh, I don't want to miss out. Like, it's so brilliant. But even like the things you don't necessarily think about, people wanting a quieter space. And every event space does have a quieter space if you really look for it. But the fact that you make it easy to find it's so key. And even just being thoughtful to, if anyone needs to take a bio break, they know where to go, and it's there on the way, and they're not taken out of the action. The second they open the door, they're back into the action. I just think all those things are amazing. You can totally see why this is a first-class event and really one of the most sought-after parties to go to in Texas. And I know we're coming up on time today, but I want to end with this one question that I like, and I really want to hear your answer because you have such a unique event, and that is, what is one thing all successful events have in common?
I think all successful events have in common is the team behind the events. They truly believe in the organization that they're doing the event for. I think you have to have that love and that commitment to that organization or to what you're raising money for. And without that, you don't really have your heart in it, so to speak, or that's how I feel. Blood, sweat, and tears, anything the museum needed, I would do and be there for. But I think that there's a lot that you have to like really buy in. And so I think that any event can be successful. It just goes into the work behind the scenes and really breaking down what's most important to you and your organization, and then finding the building blocks to get there.
Mic drop. That was perfectly said. That was, you can see just through your expertise, it really just shined through in this conversation and why a night at the museum really is one of the best events in Texas. So, Chantel, thank you so much for joining us. I had an absolute blast chatting with you.
I had a blast chatting with you. Thank you so much. And you need to make sure you get to our next one.
I definitely will. And the Perot Museum's Night at the Museum will be held on November 8th, 2025 at the Perot Museum in Dallas, Texas. For more information, please visit perotmuseum.org. And that will do it for this episode of Fun and Fundraising. I'm your host, Rob Giardinelli, reminding you to keep it fun, keep it interesting, and your guests will have a great time. Have a great day, everyone, and take care.